Hello, and welcome to the Faculty Forum Online Student Edition sponsored by the MIT Alumni Association. I am Lou Alexander, the Director of Alumni Education, and will act as the moderator today. For those of you familiar with the Faculty Forum Online series, this year we're expanding the platform to include some special broadcasts on the place of service in the life of MIT. In today's broadcast, you have no doubt noticed a distinct absence of faculty in the program, in a program actually dedicated to them. What we decided to do, with all due respects to the greatest collection of brain power on the planet, we have decided to shift the focus today to yet another remarkable group of problem solvers, the students at MIT. And the students are at the very center of the crucible that is MIT. MIT's DNA is incubated in a culture of creative thinking, relentless problem solving, an entrepreneurial spirit, and a willingness to take risks. This culture is captured so succinctly in MIT's motto, mens et manus, mind in hand, or as I like to think of it, dreamers and doers. MIT really is a place where nostalgia is for the future, for what might be. And in today's program, we have the privilege of looking at projects by three students: Laura Stilwell, class of 14, Sofia Essayan-Perez, class of 15, and Rodrigo Davies, who is a master's candidate. They will each have time to give an overview of their work, and following their remarks, we'll transition to a discussion where you, the viewers, will be able to ask questions. If you would like to ask questions, just simply go to the boxes on your screen and put in your first name or a screen name, your geographic location, and the question before you hit the connect button. Before we turn to the student presenters, I would like to ask Sally Susnowitz to say a few words about the Public Service Center, which is the framework within which all of these projects happen. Sally is the Assistant Dean and Director of MIT's Public Service Center, which is in its 25th year. She has been a director of it since 2000, so for more than half of the existence of the PSC. Before that, Sally taught technical writing in MIT's program in Writing and Humanistic Studies. So to give us a little bit of background, let me ask Sally to say a few words.
Thank you, Lou. I'm excited to do that, and even more excited for you to hear the students. But just to give you a little context for that, so as Lou said, we've just celebrated our 25th anniversary, and I'm proud to say that in that time, we've helped tens of thousands of MIT students help hundreds of thousands of people. And when I say that, I think you'll be kind of amazed, if you don't already know, at the level of help that the MIT students provide and at the level of education that they gain. So I'm just going to tell you just a little bit more about the Public Service Center so that you understand how remarkable these students are and how much they accomplish, and yet how many students go out and do this kind of work. So we've designed the Public Service Center to match MIT. The programs that we have here are the ones that we've created to fit this community of problem solvers that Lou referred to. And we help them work locally across the U.S. and around the world. So they decide where they want to work, and they follow their passions in public service to do it. So they are problem solvers. They're an incredibly diverse community of graduate and undergraduate students, and they have an enormously wide range of interests from the arts, sciences, technology, invention, and they have amazing capabilities, and that's why we've created the programs that we've created to support them in using those capabilities to help people in need around the world. Every year we work with 2,000 to 3,000 students, and we've become a very important part of the MIT educational experience. And they do everything. They do local volunteering in nearby communities. In doing so, they do hands-on learning. They work with communities around the world and gain global experience by doing that, which is, I think, a priority for MIT at this time. They work through entrepreneurship and innovation. We have a program called the Ideas Global Challenge that you can find online. And if you happen to be in the area, we have some showcase events happening on April 28th and on May 5th. But you can also connect with it on an online platform, and we really welcome alumni, very important to the programs. And we feel that MIT students gain not only experience in the world, but an appreciation for their own capabilities. And I think it builds confidence in a very healthy way, as it also builds humanitarianism. And we believe both of those things are very important, as is the real understanding of how to work in the world. I've often heard about the MIT bubble. I don't know if you ever refer to that. But we bring people out of that bubble into that global experience of challenging, very difficult, intractable problems, and help them deal with those problems in a very successful way. So we not only enable MIT students to transform the lives of people in need in a very tangible way, but also to gain an extraordinary education that is part of MIT. And the people you'll be hearing from today have all done our fellowships program, and the fellowships are focused on capacity building work. And if you think about that challenge, that's a really high threshold to cross. And we have so many more students applying to us to try to change the lives of people in a sustainable way through that program than we can manage to support. And so it really is this great community of problem solvers eager to get out there and help people in need around the world in ways that really make a significant difference to them and offer great learning experience to the students. And that sums up very quickly, I hope.
Well, thank you. Sally, you have actually one of the best jobs in the whole institute. I mean,
absolutely.
You get to see all of these, bright young minds and the energy behind it, and it really is wonderful.
Thank you.
So actually, now we are going to go to the bright young minds, and we're going to start with Laura Stilwell. Laura is a senior this year, so congratulations. You will soon have that degree in hand. I'm having trouble staying in this frame. Laura is majoring in economics and has minors in biology and public policy. That might not make sense at first, but in a minute you will see that it makes a tremendous amount of sense. And when she finishes her degree this year, Laura's going to work in the Jameel Poverty Action Lab. And if you're not familiar with that, that's quite an interesting center here at MIT. And as she contemplates the future, even beyond that, Laura sees herself as working at the intersection of global health, public policy, and economics. I would say that's a pretty busy corner, and it will become even busier as time goes on. And today she will tell us about her work with GlobeMed at MIT. So Laura, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. So today I'd like to talk about GlobeMed at MIT and the work that we have done. And so I would like to go to the slides to begin. So GlobeMed is actually a national organization, and it was founded on the premise of two really firm beliefs. The one that we believe that health is a basic human right, and secondly, we believe that college students have the power and the capacity to ensure that this right is protected and to push forward the movement for global health equity. And how we believe that this is possible is through harnessing the power of partnership. So each GlobeMed chapter across the country is partnered with a grassroots health organization somewhere around the world. And so GlobeMed at MIT is partnered with Hope Through Health, which works in the north of Togo in a region of Kara. So before I go into exactly what GlobeMed at MIT does and what our partner does, I want to give you a sense of the context in which we work. So 2 years ago, when we were first starting to work with Hope Through Health, I had no idea that Togo was a country, let alone could point it on a map. And I think that there's really, and when we talk to people, they also have never heard of Togo. And there's really a reason for this. Togo, over the past couple decades, has really lacked investment, has really lacked aid. A lot of aid organizations won't work in Togo because they think that it's too corrupt, or simply because some organizations have even said Togo's not large enough, so we won't get the scale and the impact numbers that we need. And so to give you a sense of this comparison, Ghana, right next door, receives 8 times more aid than Togo. So even though Ghana is a much bigger country, it's not 8 times as big. And the difference in infrastructure is extremely apparent as soon as you cross the border from Ghana into Togo. And as a result, Togo's public health infrastructure is also non-existent. 70% of Togo's population lacks access to public health care services. So this is really the context in which Hope Through Health, our partner, and we are working in. And so Hope Through Health was founded in 2004 by a Peace Corps volunteer who was positioned to work in the north of Togo with an organization called Association Espoir pour Demain. Pardon my terrible French accent, but that means Hope for Tomorrow. And at the time he was partnered to work with them, they were basically a bunch of individuals who had band together, who were HIV positive, and who were simply infuriated by the fact that there was no healthcare services for them whatsoever. And so this Peace Corps volunteer decided to start this organization, Hope Through Health, that structurally and financially supports this system of clinics. And since that, then in 2004, AED has grown into a system of 5 clinics that serves over 1,700 patients. So how does GlobeMed fit into all this? So we ask ourselves, what resources and skills do we have as MIT students that can best fit the needs of Hope Through Health and AED? What connections do we have? What sponsorships can we get that can support the work that they do? And you might not be surprised to find out that this has mostly been focusing on technology. And so our first project started in January 2013. And at the time, Hope Through Health was using all paper-based records for their 5 clinics. All the patient records for their 1,700 patients were done by hand using paper. And so this creates a lot of inefficiency as well as potential for error. So our first project was teaching the clinic staff how to use computers. While this was a huge success and a great first step, it's needed to be sustainable in the long term so that they could have proper data management, they could have better data-driven decisions. And so our next step was to work on creating a database. And first identifying what type of database will be the best for them, what do they need the database to do, and what capacity does it need to have. And so in August 2013, we returned to Togo. And what was exciting was, one, no one was using paper-based records. What had once been a huge binder at the pharmacy with worn pages was a computer using Excel spreadsheets, and you could quickly look up information about how many prescriptions had been filled per month. But there was also errors in merging of Excel files, et cetera. And so that was the start of the database project, which we've been continuing to build and will continue again this summer. Also during August 2013, we worked on a GPS mapping project that aimed to map where patients live in order to improve the community health worker services. So really at the core of Hope Through Health is their community health worker program that goes out into the field, visit patients that live miles and miles away from the clinics that would not be able to come to the clinics on their own because they can't afford it or don't have the time to go to the clinic. And so the project focused on mapping where the patients are so that when community health workers leave or transition, the information of where a patient is will not be lost. Also, when the database project is finished, it will have the capacity to integrate this GPS data with the database in order to better analyze malaria outbreaks, TB outbreaks, et cetera, in order to have more targeted interventions. Then our next really major project has been working with ComCare, which is a mobile health application platform developed by Demaji, which is actually a company that came out of MIT. And this platform allows community health workers to collect data while in the field visiting patients, and also gives them a kind of guide to go through their visits with the patients. So one of the problems that we saw really when we were working in August was that all the community health workers had a different style or a different technique in which they were visiting patients, and so not every patient was getting the same standard of care. And some community health workers were doing things great. And so how do we harness this? How do we use what's being done well and improve upon it? And it's through this mobile application device that we can do this. And so this upcoming summer, we'll be returning to Togo to continue building this ComCare platform, to create more modules to collect data, and we'll be continuing more on the database project. And so while each of these projects are slightly different, the overall goal is really to improve data management in order to increase efficiency and to allow for more data-driven decisions at the clinic. And so while a lot of our projects have been focusing on the implementation of technology, really at the core is building capacity. And so this is an image of one of the community health workers out in the field using a GPS device. And so most of the time while I was there, I was teaching the community health workers how to use the GPS device and teaching the Director of Monitoring and Evaluation how to use the Geographic Information Systems platform in order to analyze the data. And then here's another image of Guillaume, another GLOMED member, teaching another community health worker, Justine, how to use the ComCare platform. And so really what I think amazes me is the progression that our projects have taken over the past few years. We went from doing computer literacy training to implementing a database, creating mobile platforms in order to facilitate patient interactions with community health workers. And really what this has really been able to be achieved through the power of partnership. We have an extremely strong relationship with Hope Through Health. We're constantly in contact with them in order to build our projects, to build upon what we've done right in the field, what we can improve on, and to ensure that our projects are successful in the long term. And so Hope Through Health in the next couple of years aims to expand to child and maternal health and to increase their services to reach 90,000 patients by 2018. So what this really means is that we have the potential to really influence how healthcare is delivered in Togo. And so this means that our data management systems that we create need to be sustainable, they need to be scalable, and they need to be correct in order to ensure that patients across the country of Togo receive the best quality care that they can. And so just to conclude, I've learned so much from being able to travel and working with Hope Through Health in the field. And going through this process, I've really realized the power of partnership and the power that college students can have to make a difference in the field of global health. So thank you, and if you want to learn more about what we do and read some of our blogs from our trip, you can visit our website at glomed.mit.edu.
Well, thank you. That's really inspiring. It's I mean, you've accomplished quite a bit. And it's such a distance. I mean, I just think these things are really inspiring to see. So as we turn to our next student, we go to Sofia Essayan-Perez, who is a junior here. So she's probably seeing light at the end of the tunnel. You know, it's getting just one more year after this. She is majoring in brain and cognitive sciences and has a minor in applied international studies. Sofia has also conducted research into autism as part of the Peak Hour Center, and before that did similar studies at the University of California, Berkeley, and at the Pasteur Institute in Paris. She is a leader in the creation of a new approach to teaching math and science. Her approach is grounded in local health and socioeconomic challenges that were developed through projects in rural Nicaragua. This is what Sofia will be telling us about today. So, Sofia, the platform is yours.
Great, thank you very much, Lou. Hi, I'm Sofia, and I'll start out with the slides. Could we switch to the slides, please? Great. My project is strengthening math and science education in rural Nicaragua, and this is an initiative that I've been working on since freshman year, so for the past 3 years. And I'll start off by giving some of the context of the village where I've been working. So Diria is located in the southwestern portion of Nicaragua, and you can see on the right-hand side more specifically where it is. And what I want to highlight is that in this small town, the families are living on $2 a day and working in industries such as agriculture, pottery, or carpentry. And my particular interest has been working with the high school students and teachers. So to begin with, the two high schools in Diria offer education to over 500 students that are in grades 7 through 11. And the low-income conditions that are seen in the village overall also have repercussions in the high school setting. So these two schools have no internet access, they don't have textbooks, and this was one of the issues that I wanted to tackle with the community in order to see how we could develop more resources in order to teach math and science. So in my conversations with the villagers, I saw that math was the class that students in this village most often failed. And as an MIT student, of course, that really resonated with me. And I saw that the students were losing motivation in this subject because they could not see the connection between math and then what they were doing outside of the classroom in their daily lives, such as working with their families in carpentry or pottery. And the teachers at the same time faced the challenges of having few resources to teach some abstract concepts like geometry or algebra, and as a result they had to rely on rote memorization quite often. Further, I saw that this was not only a problem in Diriyah, but also on a national scale, because only 4% of the public high school graduates in Nicaragua are able to pass the university entrance exam in math. And so this was really, the lack of math knowledge and understanding was really preventing students from reaching their professional aspirations. And so over the past 3 months of January, as a PSC fellow, I've had the opportunity to work on an approach that relates math to the local context of Diriyah. And to do this, what's been central is field work, where I shadow students in this village in order to better understand how math can concretely relate to the types of challenges that they face on a daily basis. For example, I shadow students during this month in order to see how the work that they do in agriculture can relate to a math concept, and then how these two issues can be brought together in the classroom in order to make the topics more engaging. And I've also had the opportunity to work with the local health clinic in order to understand Diriyah's health challenges and public health measures, and see how, again, we can relate them to the basic math and basic science concepts that the students are learning. And this has led to two main forms of resources. One has been lesson plans, and then also teaching the students to make educational videos. I'll start out talking about the lesson plans. And this table provides some of the examples that relate to socioeconomic activities and then also the health challenges. So for instance, I've been able to work with teachers to relate carpentry to geometry. And then with the health clinic, I noticed the problem of latrine construction and how this can relate to the concept of conics in math class. The first example has to do with carpentry, and this student here is Diego. And I had the opportunity to shadow him during one of the months of January I was there, and I saw that in his daily life after school, he would go home and trace out and cut out these really remarkable wooden, whether it was a chair or a bowl, he would have to calculate where he would make his cuts. And this was the inspiration for using carpentry in order to teach geometry. And now that this is a lesson plan being used by the teachers, it's also been really neat to see how students like Diego, who were previously struggling with math, have now become extremely motivated because they see how these concepts are actually going to help them do their work even better. These two children actually run their family farm. So their parents are working away at the capital, and they're in charge of keeping track of all their crops. And what I also saw was that in their classroom, they were struggling to learn graphs and charts and more of the statistics-based math concepts. And so I saw that this was an opportunity to merge these two issues together. So now the lesson plans that the teachers use explain statistics using or applying it to how one can better keep track of their harvested crops. So really the idea is to connect it to the practical applications that students have in their daily lives. And then in terms of the health problems that are connected to math, working with the local doctors and nurses, I was able to see that teaching the villagers how to use or the right ratio of water and chlorine pellets was a challenge. And underlying this is the concept of proportions in math. And so this was another platform to explain to students how math could have really important repercussions in terms of their public health. And a second example related to health has been the construction of latrines. So it turns out that in this village, the health clinic does a lot to explain to villagers how to design latrines so that they don't infiltrate the underground water sources. And as a result, they spread construction plans and so forth. And looking at these, I saw how they involved parabolas and circles and ellipses and a lot of geometric forms. And this is what students learn in their conics chapter in math class. And so this, again, provided an opportunity to explain math by relating it to an important health application. And I'll highlight two outcomes of the lesson plans. The first has been for the teachers, because they've been able to benefit from this new approach that shifts from rote memorization to a much more hands-on and practical way of teaching math and science concepts that are otherwise pretty abstract to students. And on the other hand, the students have been able to engage in the classroom because they're more motivated by seeing how these concepts are relating to areas that they're interested in pursuing or that they already pursue outside of the classroom. The second series of initiatives involves teaching students to make educational videos. And this has been a particularly interesting project in that it's really engaged the students to take on the same approach where they connect an issue in their local community to a math or science concept, but gives them a lot of ownership because they have to learn the concept really well and see how it can be applied to an area of their interest. And this promotes peer-to-peer teaching and also helps the teachers and the school community overall build a library of these video resources. And so here you can see how these are just some different images that portray the process of teaching the students and the teachers how to make educational videos. In the top left-hand corner, this is part of the teacher training that I do over IAP to not only explain how to use the equipment, but then also how to set up the video that the students make, using visual materials in low income settings where there are very few resources. So we normally use a whiteboard, some colored paper and markers, and very low-cost video equipment in order to make this a sustainable initiative while developing a library of videos for the schools. And more recently, I've had the opportunity to expand these approaches to other subjects, notably chemistry, physics, and biology, and also particularly for the student-made videos. I've now also expanded this to the 5 other primary schools, so not just the 2 high schools, but now expanding these same resources to the local primary schools. And these kinds of problems that pertain to teaching math and science are not just in Diria and they're not just in Nicaragua. And so I think that it's really important to spread this idea of making math and science teaching practical and motivating for students. And so I've started a website in order to house these lesson plans and student-made videos so that other areas can also benefit from these same resources. And you can visit this at instri.org. And I'd like to conclude by saying that MIT has really been a special place for connecting me with faculty and staff who have really been supportive in developing different ways and different ideas to approach this problem of math and science education. And I'd like to acknowledge the MIT Public Service Center, Dr. Allison Hind, and Professor Slocum and Graham Ramsey at ESG. And thank you very much.
Well, you're quite welcome. Thank you. I really love the way you connect the dots and using very practical situations to go from there to understanding abstract principles. And once you connect the dots, it seems so simple, but think about how long it takes to get to that point. I mean, it's truly remarkable that the stuff is right in front of us so much of the time, and yet we don't make those connections. And this is also very much in line with MIT thinking about practical applications, and it's a really very rich approach to knowledge, I think. So thank you so much. Well, now we'll go on to our third and last of the students today. Rodrigo Davies, who, as I said, is a master's candidate here. He is a candidate in comparative media studies and is a research assistant at the Center for Civic Media. His focus is on crowdfunding, and prior to coming to MIT, Rodrigo was an advisor to the UK crowdfunding platform Spacehive, and he was a co-founder of Condé Nast's digital business in India and a broadcast journalist for the BBC. So we have a pro with us today on this program. And here in the U.S., Rodrigo has spoken at the South by Southwest Festival, the Library of Congress, and the Federal Reserve Bank. Today, he's going to tell us about a crowdfunding project he did in Kansas City, Missouri. So, Rodrigo, take it away.
Thanks very much, Lou. And first of all, before I get started, I want to express my thanks to the Public Service Center for supporting this project. It's a wonderful resource for students, and it's been a real pleasure to be able to benefit from it. So if I could have the slides, please. So I'm going to talk about civic crowdfunding in Kansas City, Missouri, which was the project I was doing in January. Now, before I get started, I just want to talk a bit about what I mean by civic crowdfunding. You may have heard of crowdfunding itself. Sites like Kickstarter and Indiegogo are being used for watches, consumer products, comic books, even famous film directors are using it. But what we've seen actually over the years as kind of crowdfunding has evolved is that in the past 3 or 4 years there have been a different type of platform emerging which is trying to cater not just to these types of consumer products and other things, but also to community services. So what you have is a diverse range of individuals, community groups, businesses, foundations, even government getting together to try and produce different types of community service using a crowdfunding platform. So they're doing things like building community centers, bike share schemes, even new public pools. And of course, communities getting together to pool resources and produce these types of outcome is not new. This has been happening for centuries. But what has changed is that it's become a multi-billion-dollar industry, $6 billion in 2013. And the figure that's significant for me is that 1.2 billion of that number is in donation platforms, so exactly in the type of civic projects that I'm talking about. Now, so these platforms exist, but why would I go to Kansas City of all places? Well, it may come as a surprise that Kansas City is actually a trailblazer in the field of civic crowdfunding. In 2012, it partially crowdfunded a bike share scheme for the city. Something that's very common in other cities in the US and Europe. This is the first one to be crowdfunded. And having sort of researched that project, it's part of the sort of research I'm doing at the Center for Civic Media, I came to know that they were planning an expansion of this project. So they had 12 bike share schemes in the city. They had 12 bike share stations in the city. Which was a good start, but clearly not enough to serve the whole population. They wanted to expand that through a series of simultaneous crowdfunding campaigns, 10 in all in different zones. Extremely ambitious, but having collaborated with Bike Walk KC, which is a non-profit in Kansas City that works on these issues and actually runs the scheme, I sort of was asked if I would be able to help with this campaign and help them to think about what had worked in the first campaign and other work they'd done and how they could make this effort successful. And so I took off to Kansas City in January, and the first part of my work was getting out onto the street, understanding folks in the community that they were talking to, what they felt about the bike share scheme, whether or not they were likely to help with the fundraising effort, and if not, why not? And trying to really understand the need that they were trying to meet and whether they were meeting it. But the main contribution beyond this campaign that I wanted to make with this project was to develop the long-term capacity of non-profits in Kansas City, of which there are a wealth, to develop their capacity to leverage crowdfunding for other types of projects. So the bike share scheme is useful for its sort of demonstration effect and its visibility, but I knew that there are lots and lots of other smaller groups that were looking to do other projects who could potentially benefit from crowdfunding. And so I put together a series of workshops that I called Fund Camp, in which I got together, there were sort of open, free events, of course. I got together non-profit organizations to come gather in a group and talk about the campaigns they were thinking about running. So these were folks who already had quite evolved ideas. They said, you know, we've identified a need, this is something consistent with our mission, our work, but funding is a problem. So could we go into a kind of a crowdfunding project and use that to realize our goals? And we spent a lot of time in groups sharing what they were trying to do, who they would need to engage to be successful, and how they were going to execute on those projects. It was a really exciting process, and a number of those nonprofits, even more excitingly, were able to start those projects while the time I was there or very soon afterwards. And even better, a couple of them have already reached their targets. So on screen you see the Digital Reconciliation Project, which is working in one of the most underserved neighborhoods of the city, helping to bring together folks from different backgrounds to talk about building community cooperation, and also equip them with skills, help them to understand better in a more informal environment how they can access the services that are available to them. So it was great for me to be able to see that, you know, this, the sort of urgency and speed that crowdfunding brings, to be able to see some of the fruits of that immediately. And of course it doesn't end there. Workshops in themselves can be fantastically supportive, but there's a ton of knowledge being produced that potentially could get locked into that environment. So how do you continue to share that knowledge with other folk? Well, the next thing that I'm working on with some of the partnerships I built up in Kansas City is an online guide, a toolkit for nonprofits that want to try civic crowdfunding. So some of the basics of what are the questions I need to ask, how do I think about who I need to engage, how many people I need to engage. If we're dealing in a space like civic projects, you know, there are a ton of stakeholders involved. They may be other nonprofits, there could be government agencies, many people who you have to think about, and it's quite a different story to if, say, you know, I build an app or a video game and I want to raise money for that on a mainstream platform. On those platforms, there are a lot fewer variables and kind of balls in the air to think about. So we're excited to build that resource for people. And hope that it'll be something that they can share widely and use very practically. So that could have been the end of the project. But as it happened, due to, I think, you know, partly some of the success of that work, I was called back to make another trip back to Kansas City right at the end of January to talk at the Kansas City Community Capital Fund annual event, which was held at the Kauffman Foundation. And that was a great opportunity to meet hundreds of community organizers from Kansas City and to talk with them about some of the problems that they had faced and to get their inputs thinking about what would be useful in this toolkit. And I think the point that I really enjoyed being able to make there, you know, addressing a room full of people who had been working in community-based work for decades, you know, many of them long before I was born even, I loved the opportunity to make the point that, you know, crowdfunding is something that is best used in the hands of the people who already know their communities. In other words, nonprofits are really, really well placed to benefit from this. It's not a sort of a new technology that comes from the ether. This is something that builds on the techniques and strategies that nonprofits know better than anybody else. And so I'm really excited about the opportunity for communities like Kansas City to be able to build on the strengths they already have and leverage crowdfunding to realize some of those goals. And it's been a privilege to be able to contribute to some of that effort.
Oh, brilliant. I think, you know, these sorts of uses of virtual platforms hold tremendous power, and we're just beginning to see the maturity, the maturation of them, actually. And certainly for smaller nonprofits that can't afford the staffs and all the fundraising implements, this is going to be quite a powerful tool. So thank you so much. Now as we transition into questions, let me just start with one or two of my own. I mean, you were each people with visions, and you've come to MIT. You've charted paths to realize your visions. What was about MIT? Was there something special about this place, something unique that brought you here? I mean, anyone?
I mean, I would probably say that MIT is a place that to me anyways, you know, loves and values visions, but it also loves and values testing those visions. And I think, you know, crowdfunding is a field that I'm researching academically, and that's very exciting. But, you know, I really felt both a kind of expectation and a support to take some of those ideas and put them out there in the real world and figure out, okay, does this work or not, and why? And start to ask, you know, some of the sort of second, third order questions.
Yeah, I was really drawn to MIT's, particularly the philosophy of mind and hand, this idea of taking what you learn in more of a theoretical setting and then applying it to bring about social change. And so what I really was drawn to was this idea of using science for service. And I saw that MIT was the perfect place to expand my knowledge of the scientific and math concepts, and then also make a difference in the field of education on a worldwide scale.
Yeah, and my interest in MIT really came from its focus on international development. I think, so the first time I actually heard about MIT, I was reading an article, and I think it had to be either about Amy Smith or Susan Murcott.
Yes.
And it was about a project they were doing. And I was very interested in combining international development and health. And I was like, wow, this is really the intersection of that, and this is exactly what I want to do. And that's what actually got me looking at MIT. And then somehow I made it here. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that all happened. And, you know, the questions are starting to come in, so let me just jump to them. Bill in Hagerstown, Maryland, has a question for all three of you. What do you perceive will be the greatest technological advances in your lifetime?
I think probably driverless vehicles and their wider use. Certainly ubiquitous computing is a long-established trend, but I think the embedding of you know, computation further into processes and you know, the way we live our lives, certainly.
Yeah, I also have an interest in medical research, and I've been looking at issues of autism in from more of a molecular and cellular standpoint. But I think that what's really striking is the rate at which the imaging methods are moving in this biological field, and I think that we're going to continue seeing more and more effective ones in the near future.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always slightly biased because everything I think about is more global health focused, but really I think, you know, what is going on as Togo is the technology exists, but it's really the systems that need to be created in order to support the expansion of the technology and the implementation of the technology on the large scale. So I think more of the integration of systems and technology in order to have health systems for countries such as Togo.
Yeah. You know, here's an interesting question from Mina at the University of Waterloo. And it's a question, again, directed at all three of you. She says, my 8-year-old daughter and I are currently watching this webcast. How might I assist her to become involved in development initiatives in preparation for a long-term commitment, perhaps through MIT? Are there particular initiatives you are aware of that engage younger children? The Math and Science initiative just discussed certainly piqued her interest. There you have a convert already. So, but I just wondered, at that age, I just wonder what sort of things do you think? I mean, it's a very good question and a long route to go, but it's another 10 years, you know.
Mm-hmm. I think what matters most is figuring out what she's passionate in, because each of us have really put what we're passionate in into service work. And so for me that meant doing different camps that were related to science and health. And then I really found health was something that I was very passionate about and really forced me or inspired me to do this work. Mm-hmm. So it was really, I think, first finding what my interests were and what motivated me, and then applying that to the service work.
I completely agree with that, and I also think it's, in my case, I got involved in DIRIA since 2006, so I think that if you can identify first off, what are you interested in, but then also in which community or in which setting can you work in order to address concrete problems. And so I think that that's where things like field work and getting to know the types of issues that people face on a day-to-day basis is really important in order to come up with effective solutions.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. I think getting that connection with the community, which could be your own or it could be one in your neighborhood or in your city, is kind of where everything starts. I feel like that can be very generative in figuring out what it is you are interested in, because I feel like often children are asked, what are you interested in? And it's like a sort of a paralyzing question because they don't know. Whereas I think, and I think that's okay. I think that's perfectly normal. Whereas if if your child is sort of passionate about public service or community service, you can start with a community that is on your doorstep and think about the issues that they're facing and ways that you might be able to contribute, or or at least sort of learn about what the problems are first, as you think through ways you could contribute later.
Yes. There are some specific questions coming in, so let me go to Sofia. This is from George in Palo Alto. Has Sofia tried her approach in U.S. schools with underserved student populations, or shared it with teachers, principals, etc. at these schools? It sounds very transferable.
Yes, and that's an excellent point. I believe that it is very transferable because the U.S., and especially in disadvantaged settings, faces the same challenges as rural Nicaragua in motivating and engaging students in math and science. And this is a direction that I'm headed bringing this to the U.S. context, and it's something I've started to do already with putting the lesson plans and the student-made videos online in order to make these resources accessible to not just people in Nicaragua, but then also people here in the U.S. and students here. And then one thing I will also add is on campus, I'm involved with the Experimental Studies group, and we're always looking for different ways of teaching the GIRs or the basic science and math courses. And so this approach of contextualizing math and science is one that we're now trying out or working towards in the physics classrooms at ESG. So that is already a start to moving the approach to the U.S. Yes.
And Juan in Indianapolis asks a question of Laura. Why did you decide to do your service project in Togo?
Yeah, so actually how GLOMED works is that the national organization will partner you with a grassroots health organization. So we're lucky enough to get partnered with Hope Through Health, and that's how we got involved, yeah.
I have two related questions for Rodrigo. One is from Alex in Baxter Springs, Kansas, so it sounds like it's probably fairly close to Kansas City. He says, there really wasn't much of a bike culture 3 years ago. Can you comment on the challenges of attracting funds when community interest seems limited? Then the second question from Roz in Dallas, can crowdfunding have a negative effect on existing revenue-generating activities? So, challenges of attracting funds when there's limited community interest, and are there any negative?
Sure, yeah, two very salient questions. I think on the first point, I can testify firsthand to the challenges of biking in Kansas City, having done so in January. I ate my own dog food, as they say, and was biking around the whole time. And yeah, it's challenging in a hilly downtown area in January. Now, I guess there are two ways that I approach that question. You might say that there wasn't too much interest beforehand, but there had actually been a lot of grassroots activity of cyclists. So through Bike Walk KC and other organizations that had existed for several years before this campaign started. And I think although there might not have been a clear articulated demand for a bike share scheme, there was interest in biking, and there was a dedicated group of people who were building that community. And I think that always has to be the first step. Crowdfunding really should be the last thing you do after you've built the community and figured out that there's a need for something. And so, related to that, if you want to do a project and no one else wants it, you might want to ask why you're doing the project. You need to think about the community that you're serving first of all. And if it's perhaps people don't realize what a good thing it would be, well, you start with building that community. You don't start with asking people for money for it. And the second question about taking revenue away from existing projects, certainly a concern that a lot of nonprofits have. And I guess one point I would make is that lots of folks, particularly in larger nonprofits that I talk to, would say that their fundraising activity has gradually moved towards larger donors because the return on investment is so much greater. So they would rather spend time on big events with big donors. And that is very successful and serves a lot of institutions very well. But what that means is that the smaller donors, i.e. tomorrow's big donors, are not being kind of connected with, particularly people in their 20s or 30s who want to give a smaller amount of money, and they're not going to give a sufficient amount that they get their name on a building or on a bench, etc. And what crowdfunding does is give a way to recognize those types of contributions. And I would argue that a lot of those contributions wouldn't have gone to other charities. They probably would have gone on consumer products. And what you're doing is you're incubating the next generation of philanthropists who 10, 15 years from now will be the big donors who help build buildings. Crowdfunding is very much, I think, a sort of a training. In the civic space, crowdfunding is a training towards that type of stuff.
Oh, we need to learn that for young alumni of MIT. We have buildings that we need to build. Here was a question. I really think it applies to all of you. It was asked of Sofia. It's from Jennifer in Stewart, Virginia. And I really would like to address it to all three of you. It says, how do you think your projects will prepare you for life after MIT? So, in whatever. So, since it was addressed to you, Sofia, we'll take you first.
Sure. Yeah. It's a great point. I think that the idea of working with communities and identifying the problems that they need is very much a problem-solving approach that will help me in whatever path I end up pursuing. Right now I'm interested in becoming a physician scientist, so I think that the same approach is translatable not only to communities but then also to research settings, and how we continue to use science and math as a way of creating improved conditions, whether if it's in the high school setting or in a clinical setting. And I think that what's really at the core of this, in my case, is education. So education of other teachers, of students, and then seeing how these kinds of processes can be linked to the local context.
So I think my work has definitely informed me about what really are the challenges in global health right now, and what are the next steps that really need to be done in order to create effective health systems. Because we have, we know how to treat many of these diseases. There's cures out there, but these people simply aren't getting the care that they need, and why? And how do you work with governments? How do you work with local organizations to create these health systems that think about a patient as a whole, at the clinic setting, at the second-tier hospital, third-tier hospital? How do you create a whole health system within a country? And so that's really where I hope to work, in the intersection of figuring out those challenges.
Yeah, I think the project has really helped me to bring sort of research and practice together, and to learn how that works on the ground. So I'm planning to continue on to a doctoral program where I'm going to be researching crowdfunding and crowdsourcing in an organizational context. And to be a good researcher, and also to make the kinds of contributions to the field of sort of community capacity building that I'd like to make. Doing more of precisely the kind of work I was doing on this fellowship, I think, is going to be really important. So this was a great pilot in many ways for me, and I hope to continue to do many more projects like it.
Yes, and there are actually two related questions that I will pose to all three of you. The first is from Alan in Cambridge, and he says, how do you plan to stay connected to these organizations after graduations while you pursue a professional career? You've already mastered the art of more than 24 hours a day at MIT, so I guess that is part of it. And Cheryl in Boston asked, do you think there should be a public service requirement for all MIT students? So how do you plan to stay connected, and should this be a requirement? It sounds like it's been very rich and rewarding experiences for all three of you. So I think Maybe we'll go in this order. We'll start with you, Rodrigo, and come this way.
Sure. Well, staying connected, certainly I continue to work on the toolkit with partners from Kansas City, and since I'm going to be continuing to research this space, and Kansas City is one of the most exciting sort of communities doing this type of work, I have a sort of natural connection. I couldn't stop watching them even if I wanted to. And the public service requirement, I think that would be a really interesting idea. One sort of, certainly there are always resource limitations, but if those could be overcome, I think it would be very positive. One thing I would say, though, is that, the Public Service Center Fellowship, really, it's a very rigorous process in terms of application, and I think, it really makes you think carefully about the contribution you're trying to make and how you will make it. And so, if you were to scale it to more students, I would want to see that rigor applied across, because I think there is a danger sometimes that if students go into a community organization and they haven't thought through their ideas very well, then people get disappointed. And I think the PSC has done a really good job of making sure that those expectations are in the right place and that we get the kind of meaningful outcomes that we want.
Yeah, so in terms of my commitment, I see that I'm going to be working with this community in the long term. Coming to MIT, I had developed a different series of projects in this village, and so being in this environment has just allowed me to expand them, and I see myself continuing to broaden them and in many different ways in my future. And also in terms of the requirement of public service here at MIT, I think that's definitely an interesting idea, although I must say I'm already very impressed by all of my peers who have found in one way or another to make a difference either on campus or internationally through other programs at the PSC. And it's just really remarkable to see how the vast majority of the undergraduate body is really committed to making a difference through something that they're really passionate about, whether it's athletics or Habitat for Humanity, all these different organizations on campus.
So the first question, staying connected, that's definitely something I've been thinking about a lot as I leave MIT. But, my heart is really with the community in Togo and in this work, and I really cannot see myself just walking away. And so once I graduate, I'll have a couple months before I start working, so I'm either going back to Togo or I'll work from the U.S. with Hope Through Health on some more of their nonprofits. Management side of things, and then do my best to keep involved going forward. And then with the public service requirement, what I think, not necessarily a requirement, but some type of orientation to the Public Service Center and to what public service really means, and what it means to have these partnerships with communities and develop these sustainable projects. In the long term, because I know when I came in as a freshman, I wanted to do volunteer work. I wanted to do some type of project, but I really wasn't sure what that would look like or how it would pan out in the long run. So some type of orientation program of these are all the opportunities, these are projects that have been successful in the past, and these are how the students approach creating these partnerships and developing these projects, I think would be really, really useful, because I think there's tons of students here who have ideas but aren't sure how to implement them.
Terrific. We are down to just a couple of minutes, and there was a question for Sally. I think this is a really good way to end the session, and it's from Daniel here in Boston. And his question, Sally, is what advice would you give to someone who wants to get involved with the PSC, the Public Service Center?
You're right. That's a great question. I have a quick answer. We would very much welcome anyone who wants to get involved because there are thousands of students who want to do this. We have a limited staff, and we really look to MIT alumni and faculty and staff in other offices to help us make this difference in the lives of so many students who in turn make a difference in the communities. So you email PSC, as in Public Service Center, @mit.edu. And that email goes to me, and I will respond as soon as I can and welcome your involvement.
Thank you. And you have just seen three dreamers and doers out of a population of more than 10,000 here. And if you add the alumni population, it's 120-some thousand. So it's quite a mighty network. Thank you to Laura, Sofia, Rodrigo, and Sally. This has been a wonderful conversation, which we continue our viewers to discuss by going to the blog Slice of MIT. The URL will come up on the slide after this. And join us again in April for the next Faculty Forum Online program at the regular time of noon with a faculty member. Sometime in mid-April. We're still working on the details, and we, as always, will send out the announcement to all alumni. So for now, this concludes our snapshot of life at MIT on the 19th of March, 2014. Thank you all.